So a few weeks ago I explained EVs and IVs, and I briefly talked about DVs, Determinant Values, but emphasis on briefly. In truth, I was not ready for DVs. They were originally gonna have their own section, but like any true iceberg video, it kept going deeper and deeper, and so I withheld most of what I know about DVs, which is what this video is for. We are going to look at DVs and all the things they affect, but I'll briefly explain DVs. In the Game Boy era, there was an entirely different EV and IV system. I'll skip over EVs, since I already explained them. You know how nowadays each Pokemon gives certain EVs? Well, in the GB era, Pokemon gave EVs based on their base stats, or all stats. Each stat could have a maximum of 65,535 EVs, and you could max out each stat all at once. At level 100, every stat would get a boost of 63 with max DVs. Gens 1 and 2 had DVs instead of IVs. DVs can be between 0 and 15 for every stat. Well, almost every stat. At level 100, if a Pokemon has 15 DVs, it will have 30 extra stat points. DVs determine hidden powers typing, and can be passed on from parent to child, so pretty similar to IVs. But that's where the similarities end. It's rabbit hole time. Remember when I said almost every stat has DVs? Well, 2 stats make you question that, because there is just a special DV. You see, there are only 5 DVs. HP, attack, defense, speed, and special. As we all know, in Gen 1, special attack and special defense were one stat. As such, even in Gen 2, where the special stat was split, there were just special DVs. So in Gen 2, whatever you got in one, you got in the other. Next, there's the HP DV. You see, for whatever reason, the HP DV isn't decided on its own. Instead, the other stats decide the HP DV. If the attack DV is an odd number, then HP gets +8. If defense is odd, then HP gets +4. Speed gives +2, and special gives 1. So the way this works out, if you have 15 other DVs, then HP will also get 15. In fact, even if your other stats are just 1, at least you have 15 HP, but if you have 14 other DVs, then HP gets 0. But now we get into the more interesting facts about DVs, like how they decide the gender of your Pokemon. Unless it was always male or female, their attack DV would decide the gender based on the gender ratio. A Pokemon would be female if their attack DV was the lower half of the gender ratio. What I mean by that is if a Pokemon had a split gender ratio, which is most Pokemon, it would be female if their attack DV was less than 8. I'll show a chart similar to Wikipedia's, but a bad effect this has is that high male ratios will have low attack requirements. So for example, starters and evolutions who have high male ratios, they will be male if their attack DV is at least 2. Just 2. So if you ever got a female starter in GSC, sorry to break it to you, but unless its stats were incredible, male starters were usually better. And unfortunately, it gets even worse for female Pokemon in GSC because of our next topic, shininess.
Yes, this is it, and oh my god! This is something that is very rare. This is a shiny Pokemon. There is a 1 in 8,192 chance that you will find one of these.
In GSC, a Pokemon would be shiny if it had the right DVs. It needs to have 10 defense, speed, and special DVs, and an attack DV of 2, 3, 6, 7, 10, 11, 14, or 15. So this creates an interesting dynamic. Because HP is dependent on the other stats, a shiny Pokemon will only have an HP DV of 0 or 8, since only attack can be an odd number, but T or female Pokemon get the short end of the stick. If you remember, attack affects the Pokemon's gender and shininess, and a female's attack can only be so high, which all comes together to mean that in GSC, a starter in evolution cannot be shiny and female. A female starter's attack can only be 0 or 1. For a starter to be shiny, their attack DV can only be as low as 2. As a side note, the red Gyarados, the only guaranteed shiny in GSC, has 14 attack DVs, meaning it will always be male in GSC, which might be for the best, because even if it could be female, you should still want a male. The reason for this is breeding shiny Pokemon, because remember, shininess is determined by the DVs, and Pokemon inherit their DVs from their parents, so any Pokemon you breed with the red Gyarados will have an increased chance of being shiny. I'll leave a link to a video by Pokemon Cast in the description. This video explains how the red Gyarados can help you breed shiny Pokemon, but to quickly explain, any Pokemon bred from a red Gyarados will have the shiny gene, for lack of a better term. For a Pokemon to have the shiny gene, it needs to be the opposite gender of the shiny gene parent. And now we're near the end of the video. Some last things DVs affect are the unknown letter, hidden powers type and power, and Smeargle's pattern in Stadium 2. However, I won't be able to entirely explain them. You see, instead of considering the DVs themselves, in these situations, the game considers the bits. Okay, so try to stay with me. Each DV has a binary number between 0000 and 1111. For the unknown letter, it takes the center two binary numbers, puts them together, divides by 10, and rounded down. Afterwards, you get the unknown letter. With hidden power, the typing will be the last two bits of the DVs, and its power is the most significant bits, as well as the special DV's least two significant bits, whatever that means. For Smeargle's patterns, the DVs are put in order and made into a 4-digit hexadecimal number, which decides Smeargle's colors. Somehow. So there you have it, the wonderful world of determinant values explained. While the modern IV system is definitely better and less confusing, I still find DVs interesting. After playing Pokemon Crystal earlier this year and making a Fakemon in the GSC style, I've really grown fond of how these games work. Dare I say, they're a bit underrated and overhated, and learning more about them, what DVs were, definitely helped create this fondness. How DVs affect more than just stats makes you wonder what the meta would be like if DVs were still around. Have a nice day, you wonderful people.
Sup.